Crowds gathered across the United States over the weekend for more protests in the wake of George Floyd's killing in police custody 2 weeks ago. Thousands flocked to the heart of Washington, D.C. to voice their opposition to racism and police brutality. It comes as the majority of Minneapolis City Council members pledged to dismantle the police department, whose former officers have been charged for their role in Floyd's death. Earlier, we spoke with DW correspondent Stefan Simons in Washington. We asked him about the momentum of this protest movement and what it means for November's presidential vote.
That means that the sitting president is in more trouble regarding his re-election bid. Latest polls suggest that the Democratic presidential candidate, Joe Biden, is leading with a widening gap before President Donald Trump, even in those iffy states where Donald Trump surprised everybody in 2016 and took the states and won the votes. And the president seems to be keenly aware of this. Now, the Democratic Party would probably try and hone in on what the African-American community, but others too, experts and observers too, became a movement and call now a movement. So this is going to be interesting. What the impact will be, that it will have an impact, is absolutely clear.
And that was the view from Washington, from DW Stefan Simons. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the world, Britain was among the many countries that saw weekend anti-racism protest over the death of George Floyd while in U.S. police custody. While the rallies were mostly peaceful, scuffles broke out between protesters and police in London. Demonstrators also vandalized statues, including one honoring a slave trader.
An act of vandalism or an historic moment. For years, this statue of a 17th century British slave trader in the southwestern English city of Bristol was controversial. As the global anti-racism protests reached the city on Sunday, anger found a vent in the 125-year-old bronze figure of Edward Colston.
That statue represents years of oppression. It represents years of hurt and just a lot of emotion and hatred that has been built up inside of us. We've internalized for years, and that coming down today hopefully signifies change.
In central London, clashes broke out between police and Black Lives Matter's demonstrators. A statue of former British Prime Minister Winston Churchill was also vandalised. The scuffles came towards the end of what had been mostly peaceful protests, drawing tens of thousands to the capital, rallying to condemn police brutality after the death of black man George Floyd while in police custody in the US. The British government condemned the violence, as well as protests going ahead despite the coronavirus pandemic.
You know, we respect the right to protest, but we do not respect, and it is completely unlawful, to participate in acts of disorder, vandalism, violence and assault. We are in the midst of a health pandemic right now, and under the rules that we have put in place, it is illegal for gatherings of 6 or more people outside in open air to get together, and that is unacceptable.
For these protesters at least, there's more than one global pandemic on our hands.
And I am joined now by our political correspondent, Emmanuel Chase, who attended a protest yesterday in the German capital here in Berlin. So tell us a little bit more about the turnout.
Yes, on Saturday, around 15,000 people gathered here in Berlin. And of course, even Health Minister Jens Spahn was very worried. He voiced concerns because these protests happens in the middle of a pandemic. But to be fair, I was in the middle of that crowd. And even if social distancing wasn't respected, people, the majority of people were wearing masks. So that was quite responsible. It was a responsible responsible protest. Also, people were there to show their support to the US protesters, and it was a very moving experience to see so many people gathered there, especially at the moment they knelt for the time of George Floyd's agony, 8 minutes 46 seconds. So, of course, many worries about the fact that the protest took place during a pandemic, but also a responsible protest.
And it wasn't just about systemic racism in the United States, was it?
No, it was also very much about systemic racism here in Europe, and in particular here in Germany. And also people gathered here wanted to denounce police violence that also happened here. There were many signs, for example, showing the name of asylum seeker Uri Jallo, who died in police custody here in Germany in 2005. So it was very much about racism, not only in the US, but also racism that is experienced here by the Black community.
How is the German government tackling it?
Well, last week on Thursday, the Berlin Senate passed a law, an anti-discrimination law. So that's a first step to try and end, for example, racial profiling by police in public institutions, for example. And in 2006, on a federal level, so nationwide, there was a law that was passed to try and end systemic racism in employment, for example, or between private individuals.
Emanuela Chase in Berlin, thank you.